Okay, colleagues, good morning, good evening, good night, wherever you are. Thank you so much for joining this session. Today, it's a training session for COMDEKS Phase 4, and it's focused on the resilience indicators. I know that many of you are in the process of developing your COMDEKS landscape seascape strategies, and the resilience indicators is a really important component of COMDEKS Phase 4, and it's a participatory tool that we need to use during the phase to help assess landscape resilience and help to assess how our COMDEKS activities are progressing and whether or not they are actually improving the resilience of the communities that we're working with through COMDEKS Phase 4. So this session today is a joint session between the Small Grants Program and the UNU-IAS. So the UNU colleagues are here today. We have Sunita, Alex, and Rina, and they are going to help with this session in terms of introducing you to the resilience indicators and sharing some guidance on how to use it. And today we also have a familiar face, and that's George. He's our was our national coordinator in Ghana. As many of you know, he recently retired, but George is a real expert in COMDEKS implementation. He has been involved in all 4 phases of COMDEKS, so he has a lot of practical experience on how to implement COMDEKS on the ground and how to use the indicators. So I know some of you here are from our SGP grantee organizations who have received COMDEKS grants. So I just would really like to welcome you to today's session. My name is Rissa. I am the COMDEKS program manager and the partnership specialist at the Small Grants Program. So it's really a pleasure to have all of you here today. And I know we have several of our national coordinators and program assistants on the call as well. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining the call. And right now I'd like to pass over to our UNU colleagues to introduce themselves. So Sunita, over to you. And colleagues, feel free to turn on your videos if your internet connection is stable as well. It'll be nice to see everyone.
Thank you, Risa. Good day, everyone. My name is Sunita Subramanian. I'm a researcher with the UNU, Institute for the Advanced Study of Sustainability. And part of the International Partnership for the Satayama Initiative. And the indicators, the resilience indicators, which I believe some of you have already used, but all of you will be using in your work. We've done a slight revision to it to simplify the language and to also make it much more aligned to some more developments in the biodiversity arena. And of course, it's more the socio-ecological arena, I would say. So it's all integrated, land, climate, and biodiversity. So it's more reflective. It's not so obvious. It's definitely relevant for things on the ground. And so, we are really happy to be walking with you towards implementing this. Thank you. I'll stop here. Over to you, Alex and Rina. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Sunita. My name is Irina Miyake. I'm also working at UNU-IAS. I'm a program coordinator for Biodiversity and Society program at UNU-IAS. I'm very happy to be here with you. Thank you. And I'll hand over to Alex.
Hello, good morning and good evening to some of us. Like I said, I'm Alex. I'm the communications associate at UNU-IAS, and I also kind of handled the update of the indicators. So I hope you like them. And of course, we are always open to feedback and suggestions because we really want them to make them more accessible and easier to use for local communities. So I'm looking forward to the discussions today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sunita, Alex, and Rina. And we also have on this call two of our key partners for COMDEKS Phase 4. We have Heidike Kawai. He's from the Ministry of Environment, Japan. As you all know, they are one of the primary donors for COMDEKS Phase 4. And we also have our colleague Yusuke from the CBD Secretariat also joining us today. So I'm really happy that they are able to connect to the call and join this practical session as part of Phase 4 implementation. So as we mentioned at the beginning, and as I have been communicating to you all in emails, the resilience indicators are really a very important practical tool that we use during COMDEKS implementation to help facilitate dialogue with stakeholders and local communities within the landscapes and seascapes that we are operating in. It's a participatory tool that encourages different stakeholders using the landscape and benefiting from the landscape in different ways to share their opinions about how it can be conserved, how the resources can be sustainably managed, what are the challenges that they face. So the tool is not meant to be something that's rigid and set in stone. It's really a flexible tool that you can adapt based on local context, based on resource use at the local level, based on local languages, cultures, traditional practices, etc. So the objective of this session today is really to familiarize you with the resilience indicators so you could have a little better understanding of how you can apply this in the field and how some of our grantees who are here today can actually use this to facilitate dialogue with key stakeholders, especially local communities and civil society organizations within the landscape. And as Sunita mentioned, in the previous phases of COMDEKS, we have already applied these indicators. And based on the global biodiversity framework that we have going forward, the resilience indicators were updated to reflect some of the new objectives and targets of the global biodiversity framework. So with that, I want to hand over to our UNU colleagues who will start by doing an overview of the resilience indicators and how we can use them and apply them in COMDEKS Phase 4. So Sunita, over to you.
Thank you, Risa. I'll just share my screen. And I'll first give an overview of what of the indicators and what they mean, and then hand over to George before I continue with it. Can you see my screen? Okay, it should be okay, right?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, thanks. So yes, starting with why are we doing the whole exercise of what is the relevance of having these indicators? The idea, as Risa mentioned, is to enable communities, local communities, so all those who want to implement these actions on the ground to self-assess it's clear now, right? There's just too much noise on the screen. Yeah, okay. It's to self-assess, to plan, strategize, and to monitor socio-ecological resilience in individual contexts. So the core philosophy or principle that we adopt is that all our actions, all our activities, and what works for each of us is highly contextual. The context could be socio-political, environmental, it could be cultural. So there are multiple factors at play, and we recognize that, right? So it's necessary that there are certain, of course, there are broad targets that we are trying to meet, whether they're ecological or social, but what we need to do, what we need to aspire for, or what our well-being priorities are, all of that is something that has to be decided at the level of communities themselves. But that also means that communities need to look at what the assets that are there, whether it's natural, whether it's knowledge, whether it's human resources, to assess across them, see where they want to get at, and to get there, how do we plan, strategize, and further on review, monitor and review our activities to see if we are getting there, if we are on track to get where we wish to get to. So but the end game or outcome that we really would like communities to focus on is socio-ecological resilience, which really is the capacity to adapt in the face of change. And change always happens in a socio-ecological system. The change can come from human drivers, the change can come from natural drivers, including climate change and all of that. So change will happen, and that's a given. But the capacity to adapt to change, to recover from any shocks, and to keep moving forward, that is a resilient system. And the resilience it happens for that whole system, the socio-ecological system. And this change could be unexpected change, which we are seeing a lot of these days. And so, of course, our priority is to ensure that we live well. So it's on human well-being, but that is highly entrenched in ensuring that the socio-ecological system is resilient. So getting to what a socio-ecological system means, it's really a systemic interconnection, which means it's looking at both nature and people together, that they exist. There is a lot of interactions and interconnections, that they operate as one functional unit, which is how reality is. But we tend to, for various reasons, have this disconnect in our mind that society is different from nature, and somehow, and that needs to be, and planning happens because with this disconnect in mind. But what we are advocating for is to look at it in a much more systemic fashion, because that helps us to have more interlinkages, to identify synergies, to look at how we can be coherent in how we plan and strategize. And then coming to the concept of what we are speaking, the concept that we promote in the IPSI is the socio-ecological production landscapes and seascapes. This is a very utilitarian concept. So these landscapes or seascapes, they are spaces. It's a very, you could consider it a very utopian concept in a way, because we are saying already that these are spaces where sustainable human-nature interactions are available. And this involves basically multiple stakeholders who have multiple uses and priorities on a particular landscape or seascape. But these uses are aligned in a way that they are sustainable, and they are premised on the principles of equity, sustainability of resource use, conservation of biodiversity, respect, and integrating different knowledge systems. So all of these, this is really a very ideal scenario, but that's what we aspire to put in, to foster. So getting to a much more basic concept of what are landscapes and seascapes, it's basically looking at the connectivity of different kinds of ecosystems and different kinds of governance regimes. So it's more than just physical spaces. These are multifunctional mosaics of ecosystems, which means we say it's not just a single use. There are different types of ecosystems of either land or sea use and the interconnections between them. It involves multiple stakeholders and the interactions between people and nature. And together they make up a landscape or a seascape, and these are interconnected and they rely on each other in order to function properly. So each of these ecosystems feed off each other in a way. They highly, there's a lot of spillover effects of what happens in one onto the other. And this is something, of course, that all of us who are working at that scale are very well aware of. But these are the basic tenets within which we are operating, especially for the indicators. So what does the indicator toolkit cover? Broadly, the indicators straddle about 5 broad topics, and it ranges from landscape or seascape diversity and ecosystem integrity. So it covers a lot of the ecological elements there. It looks at biodiversity and sustainable management, knowledge integration and transfer, livelihood and well-being, and governance and social equity. Now, if you see all of these, again, it's as a socio-ecological system, they're all interconnected, and the indicators have also been developed so that they are interconnected in one way or the other. So meeting certain indicators in topic 1 would require that certain indicators have to be met in topic 5 on governance and social equity. And so a loop is created. Of course, that's it's very close to how things should work, and that allows communities to, when we do the assessment, to see how well we are doing across the whole spectrum. The other thing that we've also brought in place is that we define better time scale. So first, of course, we try to capture the status quo, but also see how things have changed over last 50 years, which is a longer term, and then over the last 10 years. Because over 50, things might have changed drastically over 50 years, but there have been cases where people have also made things have gone for the worse, and then they've tried to do certain changes in the last 10 years towards reforming what might have gone bad. So anyway, it's to capture the short-term changes and the longer-term changes. It helps us to look at the different kinds of drivers that exist and how we can address them. So again, as I said, the indicators have been updated relating to different targets of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. It's not speaking directly one-to-one to the targets, but it takes broad targets which are very relevant for the local landscape or seascape area. Looks at, for instance, what One Health, making it relevant towards these concepts. It's not mentioned as these concepts, but the indicators speak to these various concepts. So for instance, One Health, which is ensuring the health of people, animals, the environment, has some indicators that speak to each of these. And together we can make an assessment of that. Looks at traditional knowledge occupations, etc. So it's all aligned, but within the purpose of what we are trying to have within the CEPL's context. Now, the process itself, as Risa mentioned clearly at the outset, it is facilitated locally, highly inclusive participatory processes, very contextual and flexible. So the indicators have been provided in a language, simple enough, we hope, but to basically inspire discussions. So what we've done is to try and link it to the policy discussions, and to show community actions, how they can speak to these policy goals. But the criteria themselves have to be defined by the communities. They have to be determined by the communities on what they mean. For instance, what is vulnerability for a community? It's very different for each community, and that needs to be determined by the communities through the exercise of consultations and discussions, and also further contextualized for the community itself. Not all of the indicators may be relevant for every site, and that is perfectly fine. But it's important that that decision has to be made at the community level, and therefore all of community participation is encouraged. It's not just the communities, it's all of the stakeholders who are involved. So when we say community, it basically includes all of the stakeholders who are in that landscape or seascape. So we've also included mapping and inventorizing exercises have been suggested. Which is something for those who used this in the past. It wasn't clearly spelled out, but now we've spelled it out. So we've given a couple of exercises, again, as just inspiration. So everyone can be creative in how they want to visually capture changes, how they want to capture, but it helps to do some listing exercises, because that actually provides like a baseline information for the communities to get started and to take their work forward. So we've advocated for using scores. We've got a scoring scheme. It could be a 3-point scheme or a 5-point scheme from poor to high, very good. Or you can also have trend lines, but whatever is done needs to be consistent. And I guess COMDEKS probably does scoring because I know you do a lot of analysis with the scores. So whatever works for you, please use them. I think Risa has already shared with everyone the document with the revised indicators, and this is the link to them. So in the next phase, after George has given his presentation and set the scene, because what we thought is that we would use a real life landscape that George will explain, and we will use that as a test case for us to walk through the indicators. We won't do all of the indicators, but then we will look through them and then do a deep dive into a couple of them so that we get a sense of how we can use this and what kinds of challenges we may face in explaining things, or the nuances that we have to keep in mind. So I'd like to hand this over to George now, so he can explain a little bit more about how this gets implemented within your context, and also explain about the study site. George?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sunita. So colleagues, now we're getting into the interactive part of the agenda. So as Sunita mentioned, to help you understand the resilience indicators a little bit more and how to use them, we thought we would use a practical example from Ghana. And George is going to explain, how he has utilized these indicators in the past and how he has also, together with the grantee, working on the landscape, implemented it in phase 4. So colleagues, George will present, and then we are going to have an interactive discussion. If you have any questions in the meantime, please, you can write it down in the chat, or you can save them for later. But looking forward to your active participation in this part of the agenda. So George, over to you.
Right. Thank you very much, Risa, and thank you, Sitina, for the presentation. It has made the work quite easier for me to continue. As a way of introduction, let me say that I have participated in all the 3 phases of the COMDEKS. That is COMDEKS 1, COMDEKS 2, COMDEKS 3, and also in COMDEKS 4. And I was also privileged to be part of the concluding end of COMPACT when they were doing the appraisal. I managed to be part of the team. So I have kept track of how COMDEKS has evolved from COMDEKS 1 to COMDEKS 4. The key emphasis has been on identification of a landscape. And this landscape, as has just been explained, is a place where people and nature interact. Now, having identified your landscape, you identify who are the people living in there and how are they interacting with the landscape. And then you look at how resilient is this landscape, because your understanding of the resilience will enable you to plan towards restoration or enhancement or whatever you want to do. And then you look at the systems that exist within the landscape, how interrelated or how interlinked they are, contributing to conservation and also to the welfare of the people. And then lastly, you look at the entire socio-ecological production landscape, the scheme of it. How is it evolving? What are the main challenges? How can we solve this, and what is the way forward? So I'm sharing with you our Ghanaian experience, which my be slightly different from yours, but at least you can learn some principles out of it. I'll start by first looking at the COMDEKS 4, what the cardinal pillars were. And we are looking at institutionalization and mainstreaming and broader adoption of integrated landscape approach, innovating integrated approaches to conservation, sustainable land management, chemicals and waste, and sustainable financing, and building actions for the post-COVID-19 and also contributing to the post-2020 global biodiversity framework. And then lastly, and this was in line with SGP 8, which is facilitating private sector participation or support as co-benefit in biodiversity conservation in the landscape area. So what is the planning process that we have been using? The first one is to identify your priority areas within the landscape. You can't concentrate on everything, but you have to carve a niche, an area with the severest challenges and where the people are prepared to invest. The second one is to identify your stakeholders and analyze them. What are their interests? What are their fears? And what are the threats that is facing them? Then you look at a baseline assessment. So you have to conduct a complete baseline assessment from the social, economics, spatial, political, everything, so that you'll be able to understand how the landscape exists. As part of your baseline assessment, you do a landscape resilience assessment. And that is where I will emphasize on that today. From there, then you develop your landscape strategy. And out of the strategy, you develop an action plan. You call for proposal, and then you're able to select people or organizations to help implement the project. So in our case, we took the whole country, and then we looked at the Volta Basin, which is an international water. And then there is a strip of land between Ghana and Togo. And we had already implemented COMDEKS 1 and 2. So we look at the northern side of it so that we complete the entire structure. And that was where we selected our landscape for intervention. So this landscape intervention, we're looking basically at all the 5 thematic areas of COMDEKS, and also intermarrying it with GEF 8. And then we look at it also as its contribution to the Sustainable Development Goals. You know, we're supposed to contribute to certain goals. So we try to look at all these and then mix them up to identify areas of focus and areas of support at the same time. Then it comes to the resilience indicators. Now we have identified the area, and we need to understand how resilient is it. Within the last 10 years, within the last 50 years, and what is the status now? So you do a status quo analysis, look at the past, and then the very past, so that you can now postulate into the future. Now, under COMDEKS 1, 2, and 3, somehow, there were 4 main areas, thematic areas for analyzing the landscape resilience. But now they have added a 5th one, which is knowledge integration and transfer. Under 1 and 2, we shared it on the biodiversity and landscape management component. So you take the first component, that is the landscape and seascape diversity and ecosystem integrity. Now, how diverse is your landscape? Maybe there are some rivers, mountains, valleys. There are forest reserves. there are sacred sites, there are GBA, that is Global Significant Biodiversity Areas, or traditional areas that are being conserved, or there's a national park or some wildlife, So you look at all these diversities within your landscape and where they exist. So without going to the fault, you can ask the stakeholders to help you identify where all these things are when you have your base map. Then, as part of the landscape assessment or resilience, you look at also the ecological connectivity. How is the national park connected to the traditional protected areas? How are the animals, the monkeys and the chimpanzees and other, how are they related to, the forest? How are the rivers related? Some of them might take their source from the landscape area, or they empty themselves into the landscape. So you need to understand the connectivity between the various systems that you identify, the various ecological systems that you identify. Then you also have to understand the ecological vulnerability. How vulnerable are they with regards to nature, what we call the act of God? Maybe there is so much rainfall, or there's too much temperature rise or droughtness, or there's an earthquake or a landslide. How vulnerable is your landscape subject to? Then you can understand the resilience. What are the things that the people have been doing that saves the landscape from further deterioration? So you need to understand that. You also need to understand the biodiversity and the sustainable management system. What are the diversity of species that you find there, both fauna and flora? How are they being used? And are they being used sustainably, or if there's an unsustainable way of doing it? What are the innovation or sustainable practices in the area? What innovative actions are being observed there? And then how is knowledge being integrated or being transferred within the area? Then you also have to understand how the livelihood and the well-being are being handled. So you look at the human health. Are they relying on traditional health system or Western health system? And what are the environmental conditions? Does it relate to them or what? Look at the income diversities. Are they all farmers, or some are farmers, some rear animals, some are hunters, or some are fishermen? Or no, you need to understand all these things and how they relate to biodiversity. Then the last resilient area is the governance and the social equity system. How do people access resources? What rights do they have? Is there social equity, or there is a lot of inequity? And how are the resources being managed? And is it a joint management, or only by the state or by the traditional authorities? So to help you understand all these, COMDEKS has come out with some questions that will help you to come to a certain element of conclusion. Now, let me say that it is not 100% foolproof, but at least it gives you a better indicator and urges you on to go further to investigate and try to iron out. So, taking the first one, that is the landscape or seascape diversity and ecosystem integrity. How is it being done? So I'm using the map we are using now for COMDEKS 4, which is the South Afajatu South Socioecological Production Landscape. So this is the map of the area. Now, the first issue is that where are the mountains? Where are the wetlands? Where are the agricultural lands? where is the lake, where are the coasts, etc. So you need to identify all these within the map. Then you ask yourself the diversities, how it has been over the years. And then you try to score them. Now the scoring will be done by the people. So what we do, or what we did was that the stakeholders we invited, we look at the landowners, those who are farming, the traditional authorities, the government workers, women's group, youth groups. So we invited all of them to a 2-day workshop. And at this workshop, we divided them into subgroups. And each subgroup was supposed to score the landscape system using a scale of 1 to 5. Now, 1 means, 5 means that it is very excellent or very good. 4 means that it is good. 3 means that it is medium. 2 means that, well, it's fair. And then 1 means that it is poor. So on this scale, we allow the individual groups to score, having had intensive discussions among themselves to do the scoring. So the same way we did for biodiversity and sustainable land management, we grouped them, and then they were discussing diversity of species, sustainable use, innovation, knowledge management, etc. So each group will be working through all these. And then there's also the livelihood, as I have explained already. And then the governance team or the group will also discuss the various governance structures that they have. Now, in our case, as I said, we identify the area, which is about 180,000 hectares. And then we identify the important systems, which include the highest mountain in Ghana. And then it was also an area of global significant, global biodiversity conservation. We had important ecosystems like the Kalapa game within the area. And then we have a sanctuary, a monkey sanctuary, which protects colobus monkeys. Then we have the other mosaic landscape, including natural forests, sacred groves, fallow grassland, wetlands, etc. Then we look at the assets that are available within the landscape. That is the natural capital, the social capital, economic and financial capital that were available within the landscape. Now, all these gives us the ability to do the scoring. So we, first of all, look at the ecological connectivity. How are they connected? Conservation. We observed that the colobus were being conserved. 50 years ago, it was quite low because they had not placed value on tourism. But now it is very high because the area has become a tourist attraction and a lot of people go there. So it is very high for now. So if we look on the map, we have the monkey sanctuary. We have identified that one. Then we have an area that is conserving fishes. So they do a lot of fish farming, commercial fish farming. It is close to the lake. So in the past, it was low, but the current integrity is very high because a lot of private sector investment is also over there. Now, there is a canopy walkway in one of the areas that Jeff Small Grant had conserved years ago. And now it is being held in high esteem and the integrity is still high the same. Biodiversity used to be high, but now because of the National Game Park, it is very high. Now, if we look at the water protection, It was very high during 10, 50 years ago, but now it is high, but not very high. And then the mountain protection used to be low, but now it is very high. When we come to ecological vulnerability and resilience, flooding, 10 years ago, it was very high. And the reason was that people were farming in the valleys and destroying wetlands. But 50 years ago, it was very low because there was a lot of wetlands that were functioning. Nobody was disturbing their wetlands, so everything was okay. But today, flooding is very common because the wetlands have been converted into agricultural use. So the current state of the flooding in the landscape area is very high. Anytime it rains for just 1 hour, most of the places are flooded. And the flooding goes with erosion on the mountains and erosion and silting of the water bodies as well. If you look at the temperatures, that is the climate variabilities. 10 years ago, according to the people, it was high, but 50 years ago, it was low because there were a lot of vegetation. Now today, it is very high because the vegetation cover has been destroyed. And you look at landslide, it was very low in the past, but today, landslide is intermittently occurring, especially on the mountain side, because the mountain vegetation cover has been removed. Now we come to landscape diversity. You look at open and closed forests. 10 years ago, it was 3. 50 years ago, it was 5, which means that it was very high. But now it is 2 because people do not respect the law and there are a lot of abuses on our local law. If you take sacred groves, in the past, it was high. The conservation was very high. But today, the conservation is just medium. If you take the grassland, it was high, but today it is very low, which means that a lot of grassland are becoming bare lands. Mountain forests was very high, but today it is low because traditional belief system that was used in protecting those areas have become low. If we take the agricultural lands, it is also the same, low, because the fallow periods have all gone down. So the group would do all these scoring, as individual groups. And when they finish, we put all of them together. We put all of them together to do what we call the group scoring. Now, the scoring is put in the table, for each group, and then we aggregate it to have a common score. After going through the entire period of discussion, the landscape diversity was scored 3.5, which means that is not very high and it's also not very low. It is medium. Yeah. So something needs to be done to make it high because there should be a high diversity. If you take biodiversity and sustainable management, aggregating, we got 3.15, which also means that it's not too high, it's not too low. So there is a need for intervention. However, if you take the livelihoods, we got 2.9, which means that the livelihood of the people were quite low. You look at the governance and the social equity, it also scored 3.1. So this immediately tells you, or it gives you an idea of what you should do to be able to enhance the environment in which you are going to work. You need to work more on the landscape, ecosystem diversity. You need to promote activities to ensure biodiversity conservation. And then livelihood should be one of the driving forces because it is the one which underlines the reason why all these changes are taking place. You need to strengthen the governance and then the social equity system in the area. So using those results, the meeting agreed that one, we need to define a specific area within the landscape for restoration. And that is where we came to 180,000 hectares. And then we identified 1,200 hectares of areas to be replanted, because this was very close to the national park. So it was believed that if we put it on the community management system, it will benefit the community as well. Then there was a need to do woodlot planting, especially in the degraded areas along the places that had eroded. There were some sacred groves which were losing their forest cover. So 4 of them were selected to be rehabilitated. And then we identified agroforestry farms that need to be established. And also the need for local bylaws so that we can regenerate the area. It was agreed that we enact laws to protect these endangered species. That is the white-breast guinea fowl, the red and olive colobus monkeys, hippos, honey badger elephants, and buffaloes. So this was the outcome of all these discussions that we had at the workshop. Of course, there were also recommendations to improve on the economic resilience by introducing certain activities, and all these were identified as such. So putting all these together, we now identified activities that could take place at various parts of the landscape area. So we have places for climate smart agriculture. We have, and this was the areas where they were experiencing a lot of temperature variations and also flooding. So it was expected that if we introduce climate smart agriculture, it could help, because this is based on conservation practices, and you will not be exposing the soils too much. Then a lot of agroforestry activities, that they need to do plantation development, fruit orchards as some of the livelihood interventions, aquaculture on the areas where they were doing the fish farming, introduce agroforestry, introduce low land farming, climate agriculture, and then low agriculture farming. So in a broad sense, we try to map out areas where certain activities would take place based on the outcome of the analysis. So I think I will end it here, because I was given a very limited time, and I will allow colleagues to intervene with questions or any further clarification. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, George. That was so interesting. And I feel like I already know so much more about how to use these indicators on the ground. That was such a very careful and detailed way of explaining what you did in COMDEKS Phase 4. And really exciting to see the work that you've done. So now with this background, George and Sunita, and this practical experience that we have, I guess, Sunita, maybe I can hand it over to you in terms of the next step of the agenda. But maybe before we move on to that, we had a question, George, from Vivek. Vivek was asking, how did you determine the actual size of the landscape? And I know you kind of touched on it in the presentation, but maybe if you could just speak a little bit more to how you, the stakeholders, the NSC, decided on the dimensions or the definition of the landscape size.
Right. It was an open discussion. So we place the maps on the wall, and then the people will identify that, no, this is the area we want to work, this is the area we want to work, this is the area we should work here, we should work. So they negotiated. So at the end of the day, we look at it and then we use scale to calculate those areas together and determine that, okay, now if we can be able to delineate this area, then all the action that people want to undertake will be found within the defined area. So that is how come we agree that, okay, I think 180,000 hectares, scattering all over, will be able to meet the activity that the people intend to undertake. Yeah, but the selection of the area, as I said, was influenced by COMDEKS 1 and 2, because we had already worked on the southern part of it, which was quite successful. And the people in the northern part were always asking for an extension of support so that they can replicate what has been done on the COMDEKS 1 and 2. So that influenced the choice of the geographic area. But in terms of the delineation, it was jointly done with the people, based on the problems that they identified in the areas and what they intend to do to support it.
Yeah, thank you so much, George. I think that's very helpful. And of course, the actual landscape selection really needs to depend on the discussion with key stakeholders, local communities, the NSC, as well as with government partners, UNDP country office, because sometimes there are significant areas where a lot of resources are being invested, but there may be other areas that are not being attended to. So all of these are discussions that need to take place, to kind of determine what's the best selection, and also based on the COMDEKS resources and SGP resources available to actually implement projects. So we have a question from Faustine. So Faustine, if you can unmute yourself and ask your question. Faustine is from Tanzania. He's our national coordinator from Tanzania, and Tanzania is one of the new countries that is now joining COMDEKS Phase 4. So Faustine, please ask your question, and then we go to Hyacinth.
Hi, thank you so much, Risa and everyone, and nice to see George again. We really appreciate the experience and actually the knowledge that you have. Thank you so much. It's a great learning process for us, especially that we are now embarking into COMDEKS, because this is our first time to join the COMDEKS. So we were not part of COMDEKS 1, 2, 3, but now we have the opportunity to start and roll out the process during this COMDEKS talk. So it was really important for part of this meeting, and thanks for sharing the great experience. I'll do my homework and read more and also consult you along the process. I have a small question now. In Tanzania, we are now developing the CPS, the Country Program Strategy for Operational Phase 8, which will go alongside the development of the actually for COMDEKS. So I wanted to know, from your experience, how long did it take to identify the landscape until when you started the actual community-based interventions on the ground? Just to check on. Thank you so much. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Faustine.
Yeah.
George.
Thank you very much, Faustine. Nice to see you again. And yes, the duration would depend on your country program, because the first and foremost thing is to identify the geographic area, as Risa said. You have to negotiate with a lot of stakeholders, with the UNDP country office playing a very critical role, because we are expecting them to help with the investment. The COMDEKS funds alone cannot. Then sometimes also you have to discuss with other donors to see whether they will come along with you to support you with the funding. Then you have to also have discussions with the traditional authorities as to their cooperation and their willingness to negotiate with others to work. And then the state agencies, whether they are prepared to take a step forward to help the communities in the implementation of most of these activities. Now, all these processes, plus identifying a consultant to do a baseline assessment. And as I said, the baseline assessment is on a social, economic, spatial, and also institutional. All these together, you need between 3 to 4 months continuous working to be able to arrive at a conclusion. The consultation with the various communities, depending on the area, it has to be continuous so that you don't break for lack of enthusiasm or lack of trust of the people. It has to be continuous. And then also the stakeholder workshop, it must be almost the same people you consulted, now selecting their members to come together in one geographic area to do the actual selection and actual discussion. And all these must be in a continuum. Otherwise, if you break, it loses confidence of the people. And you need to also get the people be on your side. So you have to identify CSOs within the area who will be willing to go with you, and then you work together with them on this same process. So I'll say that between 3 to 4 months, you should be able to complete this baseline process.
Thank you so much, George. And I think it's also important to take the time to do the discussions thoroughly and to have a very participatory consultation process. Of course, you know, at the global level, we give you these deadlines that you need to have these strategies done by this date. But at the same time, it's also important to spend that time to consult with the communities and the stakeholders, because this is the essence of your COMDEKS program. You're building your COMDEKS program based on these consultations, based on the landscape, based on the challenges. So it's important to do this groundwork and take the time to do it and not rush through the process. So we are midway through our discussion. I'll take 2 more questions from Hyacinth and Ariana, and then we need to move on to the next part of the agenda, which is the more practical session. So Hyacinth and then Ariana.
Thank you, colleagues. Risa, thanks a lot. I think in George responding to some of the questions, prior questions, he has answered a few of mine. But I just want to say thank you so much, George, and we're so happy to have you on. I told Risa already that I want to do I have to do a South-South with George. I mean, Risa, there's no issue there, because we have, George, I know you focus on landscapes, but we are trying to do, it's our first actually, and we're focusing on landscape and seascapes. But when I'm listening to you in terms of the areas, the sizes, hectares, and on all of that stuff, I think for us in focusing on landscapes, we're trying to look at coral restoration, mangrove restoration, in particular protected areas that are designated for protection. And it involves a lot of stakeholders. That part is where, there are a lot of, we have high private sector partnership. Do you have any experience that you could share where you have implemented COMDEKS with private sector coming on board? That's number one. The other one is for the landscape. For example, we have a particular area that we're focusing on. It's a huge area, but we're not going to say physically work in all the areas, but I think overall the area will be influenced. What hectare, when you write in to say you're targeting X amount of hectares in your country program, when you're developing a document, Do you put the entire hectares of this, the area, the geographical area, or you just put the hectares that you will be focusing on? For example, the entire area is like about 200 and odd hectares. We're probably focusing on 50,000. Which one do we put in the document that we're focusing on? Because somebody said, persons have said to me, Hyacinth, if you're working in a protected area, the entire area will be influenced. So our activities will influence the area, but there are certain areas that will be directly affected. Do we put the entire area? I just want to hear your feedback. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Hyacinth. So I'll pass to George just to quickly answer this. But Hyacinth, we also have on this call Gökmen, who is our national coordinator from Turkey, and she also, like George, is an expert in COMDEKS implementation, more specifically focused on marine conservation. So I think Gökmen might be a really good resource for you to connect with as well in terms of integrating both landscape and seascape management into your strategy for COMDEKS for going forward. But let me just pass to George to answer those two questions.
Right. Yeah. So thank you very much once again. Yes, the private sector involvement is one of the principal pillars for COMDEKS 4. And also under COMDEKS 2, we involve them. Under COMDEKS 4, we, according to country program strategy, they are looking at the livelihood activities as things that should be sustainable. And it should be along a chain, production chain, say that even after the project, it will still be there. So we are looking at the private sector involvement at the marketing side of it, where they will be involved, or where they will provide the market for the communities to provide resources. We have the rice cultivation along the water areas and also on the mountain areas. Now there's a private sector institution that is processing. So they will buy these organic rice products at premium price so as to encourage the farmers to do more of the organic farming. Otherwise, there's no incentive in going to organic production. So that is, then the other area is on the ecotourism. The ecotourism, we found that the community involvement in ecotourism was always not the best. I give it to the private sector and it works. So under the COMDEKS 2, we had a private sector, involved in this monkey sanctuary, running the area, and it worked. And it's still working, but far better than would have expected. So the private sector involvement in COMDEKS is very, very important. If we want to sustain the various interventions and activities that we'll bring on board, we need the private sector to carry it out from pilot level into production level and even beyond. Now, in terms of the activities, I would say that we don't have to spread. You don't have to spread thinly. Just concentrate on areas that you think you can have the biggest impact, because your impact will serve as a case study for upscaling and mainstreaming where necessary. So the area may be large, but select places where your impact will be stronger and then concentrate on that. And of course, now that we have also the knowledge management sector being seen, then you try to document and make it known so that you can spread whatever you are doing, in that small area. And sure, it will catch up.
Thank you, George. So, Ariana, I'm just going to answer your question quickly because I want us to move on to the next part of the agenda. So, colleagues, when we were starting this process of doing the COMDEKS landscape seascape strategy, one of the things that we discussed one-on-one was using some of the COMDEKS grant allocation to support these consultations, these discussions, and development of the COMDEKS landscape strategy. We talked about in some of your cases, you're using like 20,000, 25,000, 30,000 of your COMDEKS allocation to actually do these discussions and apply the resilience indicators. Because of course, you need to travel to these locations. It takes time. You need to organize workshops. All of these things have costs. So this is something that you can use your COMDEKS grant allocation to facilitate. And this is exactly what George and several of the other colleagues are doing. So Ariana, let's have a separate discussion on this now that you are just starting this consultation process. So I think let's move on to the next part of the agenda because we'll have even more questions after this session. So Sunita, let me pass it to you.
Yeah, thanks, George, and thanks everyone's fascinating discussions. Also, what's the word? It's very satisfying in a way to see how this is being implemented because it's the diversity of challenges, that are there, but also the outcomes that come out of it. So I don't know. I feel a bit hungover with the discussion to get started.
I know, me too. I feel we needed 3 hours for this webinar.
A whole day perhaps, but this is really nice and it's actually quite beautiful. So what I'm going to do, what we plan to do is walk through the indicator set. So all of you have also the resource. So the suggestion is let's have a look at the indicator set together. We go topic by topic, and then we can do a deep dive, maybe in the sustainable use one, just for us to do it as an exercise using George's site as an example, because thank you, George, for actually, you mixed the two, the old and the new, I could see, and the tables that you put there, looking at the time scales and all of that, it's like a proof of concept kind of a thing. It demonstrates that it can be a good exercise. So we can see which ones we want to have a deep dive or at least have a more careful reflection on today, but we can always come back later. So I'm going to share my screen with the indicators.
And while
I guess you can see them.
Sorry, Sunita, while you're bringing that up, I just want to mention to the colleagues, this session we designed kind of to be an informal session, but also for us testing this whole explanation of the resilience indicators. So we can also schedule follow-up webinars based on the discussions that we've had here, just to continue the discussion, to continue sharing the experiences. And we can also have specific bilateral calls to dive deeper into your specific process of developing the strategies in your country and your landscape. So I just wanted to mention that. So Sunita, back to you.
Thank you, Risa. Very good. You can see my screen. Can you not?
Yes. If you want, you can make it a little bit bigger, increase the size of it. Yeah.
This one?
Perfect.
This is
yeah,
okay?
perfect.
Okay. So if people are not comfortable seeing on this screen, I think because you shared it also in the chat, I saw. So if you want, you can have a look at it. Let's just go one by one through the topics. So the first topic is looking at the landscape or seascape diversity. And let's keep George's case, the site in mind, the landscape in mind, as much as we recall it. But he spoke about, in this particular topic, basically it's about the diversity of the landscape or the seascape. And the way we have explained it is the first cell basically speaks about what is it that the indicator tries to capture. So, when we explain it to the community and to the other stakeholders, we know exactly why we are doing this exercise. And of course, the communities can then go to a deep dive into what is it that constitutes the mosaic nature of the landscape. so the evidence from experiences, I mean, the evidence basically states that the higher, the more safe nature of a landscape, the more is its capacity to be resilient to different kinds of shocks, especially natural shocks. So the question really is does it have a diverse set, a mosaic of ecosystems? And I think George's case, I mean, you've already done it. So this essentially requires a whole mapping exercise. So when we start the process, we suggest that we get the communities to draw up an ecosystem, a whole map of the landscape to see which is where placed in, and look at the various components of the landscape or the seascape. And so once that's done together, there's a better sense of the quality of those different components and how interconnected they are. All of that can be very visually seen, but that exercise needs to precede this so that this question can be directly looked at and answered. So we could either you could do a scoring exercise after the whole analysis is done. So that's a whole consolidation. The score itself, it says where you stand in terms of, okay, give a ranking, but the details is where all of the essence is. So the second cell is really very, very important to actually spell out all of the various components. The second part is once we know if it's the diversity of the landscape, then we're looking at how connected these different components are. So we're looking, this basically is to look at ecological connectivity. Is there a space for different life forms to keep moving, for people to move across various types of governance regime? So we have from protected areas to buffer zones to what we call other area-based conservation, effective area-based conservation. So it's buffer zone area. And it could also be the production areas, but between them, like I know this came up in the discussion earlier, there's a lot of spillover effect. And I think it was Hyacinth who raised, like, which is the effective area that we are going to be looking at? Because of course, in a landscape, and that's the definition that needs to be very carefully made along with the communities. So the connectivity between these resource flows, between actions and outcomes, this needs to be explained and that needs to be understood. So if it is very high, that's very good. But if it isn't, it helps to see that, yeah, it needs to be addressed because upstream, downstream, and even horizontal, connections are often can be ignored, and that needs to be addressed. And then we get into the third part of this particular topic, which is on assessing ecological vulnerability and resilience. So this basically captures a state of vulnerability to natural shocks. And I think George already did a nice reckoning of this. And once we identify the vulnerabilities, how capable are we to cope and to adapt if there are mechanisms in place to overcome such shocks? So that helps. So if they feel they're underprepared, then definitely things have to be put in place. And if it's possible to do it with the resources that are inside the landscape, or if they would have to bring in other resources from outside, it's all of these planning and strategizing that and reckoning of things, of aspects that has to be done to see how to cope with these risks. So it has got two components. Is it prone to natural calamities? And second is that if it is prone, does it have the capacity to cope or withstand? So all of this could be put into a format as an exercise that identifies vulnerability, the degree of risk, status quo that is now, what was it 10 years ago, what was it 50 years ago. So it helps us see historically how things might have eroded or maybe even strengthened. But that gives a progressive, it gives a time map of how we are doing, and also then identify what measures can we put in place to cope and recover. So that's the first topic. Are there any questions for George or for us on that particular topic? We could take one or two now, and we could always come back at the end, but I'm just going to also see. Yeah. I can't see.
I think
I
no
can't see if there are
questions.
questions.
Yeah,
No?
no questions at this time, but maybe we can go through the
There are
indicators.
two?
Yeah, so I
Okay,
think
yeah.
we'll get more questions when we actually start deep diving
Okay.
into that one. Yeah.
Okay, all right. The second one is where we wanted to do the deep dive.
Yeah.
So this one, the second topic is on biodiversity and sustainable management, which is really the core of the activities on the ground. So it's all about use. So the exercise we start off with, there are two exercises that we suggest. One relates to sustainable use practices. So it's looking at our sustainable practices being used to conserve and responsibly use the resources. And these could be, and that depends again on context. It could, for example, it could be sustainable harvesting practices, agroecological farming, it could be rotational practices. So there could be multiple activities, right, because of the mosaic nature of a landscape. And so the suggestion is to report on these different activities as they are, and to indicate since when they've been practiced. So it's also to see the level of knowledge that is there within the community to sustain these practices. And if it's relatively new, it helps them to see if they would need to get more expertise. The second exercise looks at innovation in sustainable practices, and that's looking at if there are, it's an adaptation issue essentially. Are new and innovative practices, both in production and conservation activities, across all of the various activities that might be there, livelihood of activities that might be there, being pursued in order to adapt to changing conditions. And these changing conditions could be natural. So it could be, for instance, climate change. It could be other environmental issues, and also changes, economic and political changes. So these innovative practices, so for instance, it could be new livelihood activities such as ecotourism, for instance, or it could be, different craft-related activities that are based on traditional practices, traditional artisanship, but then it's coming up with new products and using new marketing techniques. So that might actually have a higher value, but lesser pressure on the resources itself. So essentially to look at what exists and if something innovative is being practiced, to list them and do it as an exercise. And then we get into, again, within the same topic of biodiversity and sustainable use is diversity of the species with which communities actively interact. So the more diversity that exists, that's the understanding, is the more diverse species that are there, the higher the resilience, because it helps to create a buffer against different types of risks. And these risks, again, can be natural risks. They could be, so it could be, risks related to, for instance, disease. It could be risks related to production. It could be risk. It could also be risk protection from risks related to economic shocks. So all of this is directly linked to the diversity of resources. And so to capture the extent of diversity that is there, and if that has changed over 2 time periods. And So one is the diversity, and that's just diversity, right? But then how easily accessible or available are these resources to people? That's another level of information. So it's like then we might have some germplasm, for instance. This is some area where conservation activities is going on, but people are not able to access it. That doesn't provide much in terms of risk aversiveness. So it's important to see if that to also evaluate if they are easily available. If they are not, how can that be made? It's a strategic decision to make. So that's in the sustainable use discussion. Risa, do you want to discuss this now, or shall I just go through all of them and then we come back?
I think maybe let's pause on this one, and maybe if we can actually go into the deep dive now. Sunita, what do you think? Because we have about 40 minutes left. So I think let's go into the deep dive, and then we can get some more questions out of it.
Okay. Okay, so what we thought because this is in many ways the core of all. It brings together multiple things. So we were thinking that maybe we could have like a deep dive. We could use George's case as a framing, but then we could raise we could discuss on what this means and how this needs to be tackled at the community level. And if you have any questions.
So George, maybe you and Sunita can come in for this part of the agenda. So the question that we wanted to look at, I believe, was specifically on the theme of sustainable use of resources within the landscape. So are sustainable practices being used to conserve and responsibly utilize the resources in the landscapes? So for example, sustainable harvesting, agroecological practices, rotational fishing, rotational forestry. So it's at this point we're going to have a discussion on this landscape. So we're using the example of George's landscape. He has already identified some of the environmental and social challenges and uses within the landscape for us. So if we were to look at this particular question, George, maybe you can lead us on this question. So at this point, we are all, pretending as if we are stakeholders in the landscape right now. Some of us can be representatives from youth groups, some can be from women's groups, some can be traditional farmers using traditional practices. Another stakeholder may be a large-scale farmer within the landscape using highly mechanized equipment to do his harvesting. So these are some different types of stakeholders that you may have in your landscape. So George, if you can lead us through how we would discuss this in a community setting or in a practical setting. How do we assess what are some of the sustainable practices being used or unsustainable practices being used, and how do we create a dialogue around that in terms of coming to a consensus on what should we do through COMDEKS to address some of these challenges?
Right, thank you. So colleagues, for once, let us all be like stakeholders in a meeting. I want some of you to assume that you are farmers. Some should also see themselves as landowners. Some should see themselves as government workers in the forestry or social welfare or something like that. Some also should see themselves as the private sector operators. Now, Sutina, can you roll down a little on this biodiversity for me? Yeah, go down.
Can you repeat? Can you go down?
Go down.
Do you want the question?
Yeah, the questions, yes.
Okay, just give me a second.
The table with the question, yeah.
This one, right?
On the biodiversity and sustainable. Oh, okay. No, I think you have to go up rather. Good. So go to.
This is the one. This is the vulnerability one. So you want the sustainable use practices.
Yeah, sustainable practices being used to conserve and responsibly use resources. All right. So, colleagues, we have been asked that let's have a hypothetical landscape, and then we are being asked, are the resources being used sustainably?
I'm just going to the
Okay.
it's there in the write-up, so I think that's what you were looking for.
Yeah.
Just give me 1 second, please.
Okay.
This one, right?
Yes. Yes. So, just cast your mind back on your area. Just identify an area you have been working in. How are the people managing the forest resources? Are they harvesting the forest resources sustainably or not? On a scale of 1 to 5, how will you rate yours? So anybody at all can pick that.
So let's think about the landscape that George talked about. So maybe we can get some volunteers, or I can identify, for example, maybe Ariana could be like a representative from a woman's group doing traditional farming in the landscape. Maybe Aimee, who is our national coordinator in Cameroon, he can represent, a private sector company who has more very strong economic interest in the landscape, and lots of resources to invest in the landscape. So we have Aimee, we have Ariana. Who else can we assign?
Someone for local government and someone with a farmer.
So Hyacinth, would you like to be our government representative?
Oh Jesus, Risa, I think I have a good idea of our government, so I'm going to use it to make my responses will be based on our government.
Yeah.
And who else do we need?
We need a farmer and a forest.
Yeah, Abu can be the farmer.
Okay, Abu, yes.
Okay.
Thank you for volunteering. Abu will be our farmer.
Okay.
So George, facilitate the discussion among.
Yeah. So now I'm going to describe the landscape. It is composed of diverse mosaic natural ecosystem with terrestrial and aquatic resources and other land uses. It is a mountainous area with grassland, wetland, rivers, close to a lagoon. There are a lot of land uses in the area: home gardens, cultivated fields, fruit orchards, pastures, haymaking, forestry, agroforestry, irrigation at the end of the corner there, and then water wells. The landscape has gone through a lot of wildfire, and of late, anytime it rains, part of the landscape get flooded. So there are pockets of agricultural lands scattered all over using slash and burn farming system. Now, the question, is the landscape being used more sustainably? 5 issues or 5 answers possible. Very high, which means that there is a large number of natural ecosystems that are being used. High for 4, medium, low and very low. That is, very low means that there is only one or very small number of systems that are being used in the area. So now let's open up for discussions on this, and then each one of you, at the end of your discussion, you will score along this line.
So maybe we can start with Abu. Since
Abu?
you're our
Yes.
farmer, Abu. So what do you think, based on this question that George has posed, what do you think is happening hypothetically? What is your experience about what's happening in the landscape as a farmer? Is it good? Is it bad? What are some of the challenges that you're facing as a farmer?
Thank you very much, colleagues. I've been farming in this landscape. I'm a cat farmer. I have a fish pond, and I look after catfish. So I will develop some fish ponds in the wetlands and did some embankment, and hoping that I can sell both the fingerlings and the catfish. But I have challenges in this landscape, George and Rose. Sometimes my fish ponds are flooded, and so I have a problem with my activity. I also have some reptiles that are coming from the nearby places in the bushes that have been restored that are also eating my fish. So we are having challenges, and we're seeing changes in our productivity because there has been some interruptions by other farmers upstream and for us who are downstream. So, George, we find the landscape has changed, but we are trying to adapt by doing some embankments in the fish processes.
Yeah. So with this description, how will you score? So
which question now should I score, George?
Yeah, what score on a scale of 1 to 5? 5 being the highest, that is being used sustainably, or 1 which means that it is not being used, or it is there's unsustainable use. So what will you score within this range?
I would score 3.
3, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Great.
Good. Thank you so much, Abu.
Thank you, Abu. Another person, yeah, who?
Okay, so maybe Ariana, so you are representing, some women's groups in this particular landscape. What's your experience in terms of how the landscape is changing and how the resources are being used? And are you using any traditional practices as a women's group?
Yes, well, I think women's group are using more traditional practices for farming and for small fisheries also, but there's the challenge of climate change in terms of intensified periods of flooding and then intensified periods of drought sometimes. So access to water is a challenge. And also there's technical assistance from NGOs and government institutions, but it's not stable. And once the projects are done, it's difficult to access more technical assistance and resources to implement some sustainable practices. So I think women's group are more dedicated to promote and to seek for traditional and sustainable practices, but there's also the challenge of land tenure by women, and also the challenge of bigger farmers in the region having access to more, of course, inputs and technology. So that it's a challenge for some of the women groups, but there's also really good practices and cases that prove that there can be a sustainable use of land and resources. So I will also score 3 for this particular case.
Okay, thank you, Ariana. George, do you want to respond to anything that Ariana contributed?
No, I didn't hear Ariana's scoring. What was her score?
Her score is 3.
3. Okay.
So good. So
Right.
as a woman in the as a woman's
As a woman,
representative.
yes.
Yes. So she
So the
talked
woman,
about some of the climate challenges, the issue of land tenure, the issue of bigger farmers coming into the landscape and maybe taking control of some of the resources. So since she brought that up, maybe we can ask Aimee, who is representing one of the large farmers in the landscape, what's his perspective? What do you think about what Ariana and Abu have said?
Thank you, Risa. I agree with Ariana and Abu, but let me have a look in two aspects in our landscape for the private sector. First of all, we are facing the issue that the reality in our landscape is that we don't have industry. So there is poor industrialization. But
Aimee,
yes,
you are supposed to pretend to be a private sector investor.
private sector operator.
You are pretending to be a private. So you're the bad guy in this.
Yes,
in this landscape.
Could be a good guy too.
Could be a good guy too. Yes.
Yes,
so Aimee, you need to
yes.
pretend to be the private sector. Are you a good private sector partner, or are you an unsustainable private sector partner in this particular landscape that we're pretending to be in?
I think I'm a sustainable private sector partner.
Very
but
good.
it's good to know the reality, as I was saying, lack of industrialization, but very high economic activity because we have a stakeholder coming from neighboring country to buy fish, to buy onion, to also buy maize. So yes, there is very high economic activity, but in the general view of private sector, based on industrialization, there is no industry in our landscape. So I can score this question for 2 because I think we still have something to do with private sector.
Okay, thank you so much, Aimee. That was good. George, any questions for Aimee?
No, I think he has scored 2. That's okay for me now. Good. If you can get a last person, or
so Hyacinth is representing government. She's pretending to be a government representative.
Yes.
In the landscape. After hearing the discussion from some of the other stakeholders,
yes.
What do you think about what's happening in this landscape, and how does it relate to some of the government priorities?
Thanks, Risa. From the government perspective is that, we are aware of the conventions and the areas that are designated to be preserved. And at the same time, we are conscious and aware that that's where people live as well. And it's how we find a balance. So for example, some areas in our big protected areas, they are private and public. So we'd have to do the landmarks, identify the landmarks where, certain activities, because certain activities cannot be done in a particular area. Say, for example, habitats where it's fauna and floras are that you have to preserve. So we'd have to sort of map the area. We'd want to do a mapping to ensure that the communities are aware of it and what they need to do, their role, because it's all stakeholder has to be on board. The other thing is that for protected areas, if you're working in there, it's critical to show us, we all know, sit around the table, who are the partners, because at the end of the day is how we all work together to get it sustainable for the persons who are living in and for the country to benefit from any services that it may generate. So the necessary permits would have to be in place, the mapping for particular activities and that are reserved, for the different activities, and as well as to put a budget together to see the like an annual revenue that we can generate from this area for us to go, because I want, as government, I want to see how it's going to affect my GDP, how it's going to generate employment for the communities, and how it's going to be preserved and protected while allowing for the improved livelihoods as well as alternative livelihoods.
Great. So based on that, Hyacinth, and this pretend landscape, you know, how well do you think we are managing the resources in this landscape? And how well do you think communities are benefiting from the health and well-being of the ecosystems?
Me, Risa?
Yes, you are pretending to be the government, so you have to give me a score.
I from what I think we are very strong program managers and ensure that certain enforcement and activities and what we have presented to government, to all stakeholders, and what we are experiencing in Jamaica, I put us at about 3.5 to 4.
Okay, good. So George, we have some scores from our stakeholders.
3.5. Okay. Right. So Hyacinth, is the situation improving or it is becoming worse?
It's improving. It's improving, George. And that's why I said, you know, Risa, I'm getting all. When we do these programs, George, these type of programs, I think we are more structured in the country, working with the NGOs, building their capacity to the level where government feels comfortable to come on board and do certain things, pass policies and gazetted things, and private sector coming on board, because we are structuring our country in terms of building the capacities of groups, help them to understand the balance between nature and, you know, livelihoods and all of that. So I can tell you we're seeing the results and it's improving.
So we have a very passionate government representative here from Hyacinth, right, George? She's very confident.
Right.
Okay, so George, tell us about the scores now.
So the landscape total score is 2.87, or let's say 2.88.
And how did you calculate that, George?
Yes, so the farmers represented by Abu scored a 3. Then the women's group represented by Ariana scored it also 3. The private sector scored it 2. And then the government representative scored it 3.5. So you add these together, we are giving them the same weight. So 3 plus 3, 6, 8, 11.5 divided by 4. So that will give you 4.875, or let's say 2.9. And this 2.9 is the situation is increasing and decreasing, because some of them said it is increasing, some of them said it is decreasing. But then they described the place as being prone to flooding, because that was destroying the fish ponds, and that there's a lot of instability and land tenure litigation in the area, and then there's low technology, there's lack of processing, therefore no industrialization taking place. There's habitat loss, poor community mobilization, low employment generation, and then low revenue generation from the government side. However, the government rep accepted that there's a strong managerial team that is involved in managing the area. So we can score it 2.9 and say that the situation has to be improved upon. And therefore, we turn these challenges as they observe into positive by looking at what we can do. So we have to undertake actions that will prevent flooding. We have to undertake actions that will process some of the products that will be found in the area, improve on technology, ensure community mobilization, improve habitats and the other ecological areas, and then also activities that will generate employment within the area. So this is roughly how you would do for to score on the one of the system. So you have to repeat this for almost all the sub. I think there are 20 questions. The new one has 20, yeah?
Correct.
Yes. So you have 20 questions on the 5 subheadings. So you got to treat each of them and then use the information to describe how the sub element is either being improved on or being played down. You know, so it's a combination of qualitative and quantitative analysis of the landscape.
Exactly, George. And that's a really important point. Now, of course, we're doing scoring to help guide and to help us see, okay, is it really bad or is it really good? But we don't need to get fixated on calculating the score. The score is not the point of the exercise. The point of the exercise is to facilitate this type of dialogue. So we saw, you know, each stakeholder, IMA talking about something, Abu talking about something, Ariana, Hyacinth, they all have different perspectives. Sometimes they may go off tangent. Sometimes they may say things that may not be relevant to the discussion at the moment, but this is the reality of how the discussion will take place in the community. So you as a facilitator or as a national coordinator or the grantee facilitating these discussions, you need to be able to guide the discussions, kind of identify, just as George did. So all of you just said what you needed to say as stakeholders in the landscape, but George was able to identify, okay, flooding is an issue. We don't have technology to help us develop our products. We need more support from the government, or, you know, so this is how as you facilitate the session. And I hope that you get an idea of how these discussions take place and that it's more about the discussion rather than the score.
So Risa, sorry to come in. It's more about focusing on the challenges then.
Challenges, but also solutions. Because based on these challenges and based on resources available, based on traditional knowledge, based on what partners can offer, etc., we can take these challenges and design solutions through SGP projects, as COMDEKS projects, to address some of the challenges in the landscape. So for example, if flooding or drought is a challenge, what can we do through our SGP interventions to address these challenges? Can we plant drought-resistant crops? Can we establish rainwater harvesting? Can we develop greenhouses? Can we improve irrigation? So from the challenge, you identify possible solutions that will help to improve the situation of the communities, but also for the landscape as a whole. Yeah? Ariana has a question.
Yes, thank you, Risa. No, just quickly, because I wanted actually to ask then, you, of course, you cannot have an effect on all of the possible problems, right? So you select some feasible things where you can actually have a long-term impact. And then what you, of course, you monitor that, you show the results. Would you expect us to do something similar to this when the projects are over? Because there will be a baseline just to see, okay, this was the situation, but there's such a short time between when the project starts and when it finishes that maybe you cannot see these changes very early. So, okay, we do the projects, we can monitor results, and then we do something similar to close.
Yeah, so exactly, Ariana. So at the end of these COMDEKS projects, we can do a similar assessment. And we have something called an ex-post baseline assessment. I don't know if Sunita, you can speak to it in terms of, again, applying these indicators at the end of the projects to see if we have made any improvements and what degree of improvement we've made. And as you said, Ariana, as with community-based projects and environmental projects, sometimes the impact takes a while before we actually see it happen. And that's something very important to be aware of, that, you know, you may not see a change immediately after 1 year of implementation. It may take years to see that progress. And you as SGP coordinators know that very well. You have hands-on experience on that. But Sunita, if you could speak to the post-assessments.
Sure. So this tool is it can be used, as we said from at the beginning, at the outset, right? So we use it to assess, to strategize, to plan, to strategize, to plan, but also then we do the monitoring. So which means we revisit this at different stages of it needn't necessarily. So right now it's a project life cycle, but hopefully the communities find it useful enough to keep the principles that we've got in here as part of their planning process itself, so that even after you leave the site as a project site, people continue to see how they can have this kind of a holistic approach towards planning their activities and planning their and managing their resources. So it's what I also wanted to touch a little bit on. So when we had this discussion, it was just on sustainable use, just looked at the sustainable use aspect, but a lot of the issues that related to, for instance, governance, relating to equity, relating to the interaction with other life forms, all of that also gets into the discussion. And that's why the relatedness of the indicators is something that we have to keep in mind. So in a real life scenario, it will be much more robust, right? The discussions are not going to be so smooth. The government representative will be questioned on the ground, right? When we have these interactions. And there's going to be a lot more of, as George said, deliberations that would have to happen. But that's good because it allows, as you said, Risa, this is a process, this is highly, it's to facilitate the process. It's to facilitate understanding the situation and getting the communities to look at the state of play, their well-being, and what they are dependent on for their well-being, and how they can enrich what they have now, the assets, in a more purposive manner and in a way that gives them more agency. And that needs to be kept in mind. So even after you leave, it has to be there, but doing it at that stage, at the stage of when the project is completed, at least a good way would be to see if the processes have been put in place to achieve the outcomes that we have desired. Even if the outcomes have been arrived there, and we know it will take time, but if the process has been initiated, then we are hopeful that it will continue. And there is a mechanism that has been put in place that will allow the local stakeholders to own and take this forward.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So that's another key component of the COMDEKS projects and SGP initiatives in general. How do we sustain the projects after the funding has ended? And you all know very well, this is why we try to ensure that we have income generating activities, livelihood diversification, developing value-added products to help ensure that, or even doing things like community saving schemes, women's groups like credit unions, all these types of things are mechanisms that we have been using in SGP projects to help sustain the initiatives. I just at this point want to invite Navirak, who is our SGP coordinator from Cambodia, who also has a lot of experience in COMDEKS, to just share her experience using the scoring. Because Navi, I saw you had a comment there in the chat. So if you can just come in and just briefly share with us your experience on using the indicators and scoring.
Yep. Hi.
Hi, Navi.
Just yeah. Hi. Good evening, and thank Risa for giving me a chance to share our experience in the landscape and how we use the scoring exercise. So from our learning, we think that we have to keep all the documents during we doing the country program strategy, the scoring, and also the group that we have to save all this data in the file, so that in the future when we do post assessment, we have to go back to almost to get the same group of people who are giving the scoring, so we can compare what is the change during the starting of the landscape and until the end of the programming. So we use the score as the baseline data to compare whether the score, when we asking again the same question, then whether the score is moving up or moving down. Why it's moving up? What kind of the result? The impact, the output of the program, and also when they're moving down, why it's moving down? What kind is the problem, like climate change, like the production in the landscape? Like in the case of Cambodia, as we use Stung Siem Reap watershed, we have kind of upstream and downstream effect. So wherever the upstream clear all the forest for cashew nut farming, so the rain flash flood affect to the downstream. So from that, some our score is, when we do the post assessment, some of our score is moving down. So it's not, we can see that the project is, the impact is kind of a negative impact, like the score moving from 3 to 2.5 or something. So it's really important to keep the data and to keep the group that you come to talk in the second phase. So if you're talking to the different group, then the score cannot be compared, because we provide score is based on our perception, based on our knowledge. So if we choose the different people, they have their own scoring. So it is quite the scoring. See, from our experience and during the JEF8, we are now in the process of selecting the NGO who do support us to do the country program strategy, as the UNDP country office also direct us to do to use the same the first phase outcome like landscape, because the UNDP have a number of projects like George mentioned, in the sense of mobilize resource to do more in the landscape. We have to go to do it the same with some of the UNDP project and also with the Jeff Big Side project also. So we are together, like we are really the small grant and the landscape really do with the front line, with the community, with the local community, where UNDP and the Big Side project will do at the national, at the policy level. So we provide our feedback and lesson learned to the national level, to the UNDP and to the Big Side project to change the policy, so that people in the landscape can have more benefit, like ecosystem payments, service payment, and it's also a kind of market linkages. Because in the upstream, before, you see they really no road before. People who live on the top, they have no, when they produce more vegetable, they have no market. So to make them have more food to eat, they clear the forest. They learn that they clear the forest and they grow cashew nut tree. So they say that at least 1 year they can earn a kind of 1,500 per year. So we're better. That's why they keep moving, clear for more forest for the farming. So the land use change, and then more problem, because the top of the mountain, like at the top upstream level, is very important to keep the water flow to the city. So from that, from our experience, sometimes some kind of indicator is move up, of course, and some is move down, because first thing is change, land use change, and it's also the climate change as well. So it affects our result.
Yes,
from our side. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Navi. I think each of you need like a whole session just to share your experience, because there's so much learnings from using the indicators. And I shared with all of you in emails many times. I also put it in the chat here again, a link to a publication from one of our previous COMDEKS phases, which provides you all with case studies from the various countries on how they conducted their assessments and some of the key learnings that they experience. One of the things that Navirak talked about was, using the same group of stakeholders to do the assessment. If you have different stakeholders participating in the assessments, you will get different views and responses, but also that is a major challenge. How do you get the same people to participate in the discussion at the start of the initiative and compared to the end of the initiative? So this is why we're saying that, the actual, don't get caught up in the score. It's not so much the score, but it's more about the process and the discussion and facilitating that dialogue. Maybe if I can also just pass quickly to Gokman from Turkey to also share her experience doing these consultations, using the indicators and some of the learnings that you've experienced as well, Gokman.
Thank you very much, Risa. We are on the COMDEKS 4 also, and maybe in a month we will re-experience it, re-evaluate those indicators with a different group. But since we are in the fourth one, we have 3 experiences. What basically in my mind come into my mind is definitely to understand the differences between the questions sometimes. That much simple things may rise in the discussions. Just we have the responsibility to explain it to a community and let them chat each other, just to consume what is expected from that question. It is not easy for someone who had less education, who has just one task in his day life, and he's just doing it, just making a fishing. He doesn't consider comparison between economic, social, and ecological values. It was, I think, the most fascinating things that lessons we have got. There, the people who live in the site, exactly at the literally in that site with the fact they are in front of it. And sometimes it's a need to translate the experiences with other communities, with other cases, to let them reflect their own true value to the questions. This is the most important thing from my side, because when you make this time is not give potential time to evaluate, then you have data, but not words go on it. So it is the thing is, we are urban people, and maybe we have rural experiences in ours, but the rural and the when you are living in a natural space surrounded by species and agriculture, all this stuff, this kind of production space, your time understanding is totally different from them. So you have to create this time to digest it, not just making so quickly. That's the most important lesson we have learned. Even you translate it into the language, it needs time to reflect their views into each other, to realize what really they are thinking on this score. That's the thing I have to raise from my side. Thank you for listening.
Yes, and that's what we were saying as well. George and Sunita, we were all saying the same thing in terms of this is an important exercise to kind of get them thinking about how are they existing in the landscape. Because yes, as Gokman is saying, they may be a fisherman every day. This is all they do. They go out early in the morning, they fish, they come back. That's it. They may not be aware of the other complexities within the landscape. And through these discussions with other people from the community, other stakeholders, they become more aware that there are changes in the landscape. Same thing that Navirak was saying. If one of the farmers upstream clearing the trees may not have been aware that clearing the trees is causing erosion and downstream impacts. And the one downstream in the floodplain may not realize why he's getting more flood. It's because the trees at the top are being cleared. So all of these are things that, you know, come out during the discussions. And it's very exactly what Gokman is saying. They come to these discussions, but at the end, they leave learning so much more about the landscape and each other within the landscape and how they impact and interact with each other. So it's very important that, you know, yes, we translate the questions, we simplify the questions, we break down the questions, we don't use very technical language and jargon. We, you know, bring it to the level of the local community that they can understand what we are trying to say and they understand what's the point of the exercise. So I don't know if George wants to add anything based on his experience as well, actually doing these discussions. George, if you want to add on that point.
Yes, thank you very much. I think Goken has said it all. You, as the coordinator, needs to understand and familiarize yourself with the indicators. In fact, you can apply it anywhere and on any field that you are working so that you appreciate how to interpret the questions for proper understanding. Because if the people do not understand the questions very well, the answers they will give you might be different from what is on the ground. So you need proper interpretation of the questions. Again, also, you don't have to rush the people into getting answers. Sometimes you may have to spend more than you have planned, the days or the time as planned, just to ensure that you get the information right with them also. So there might be mistakes. You may not get everything right, but with time, you will build confidence in it, and then you also be able to correct everything. So I would say that whoever you select as a consultant leading the process, please work with that person closely, not only as a learning process, but also as a way to guide them, especially when it comes to the formulation of the CPS. Otherwise, they will formulate something for you that you cannot implement. I have trust in national coordinators because these are carefully selected people with dedication to work. And when they put their hands to do anything, they do it very well. So I believe that they will be able to push forward COMDEKS 4 to its logical conclusion so that they can trigger COMDEKS 5 as well. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share with you. As I told Risa, I am retired but not tired. So working. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, George. And I think, you know, we are obviously 10 minutes over the time, and I know there are so many more questions. But I think this session was also a session to get you thinking, and to familiarize yourselves with the indicators. And, you know, I'm going to share the recording with you afterwards. Go back and look at the recording, look at some of the materials that I've sent you, and we can have another discussion to help answer any of the specific questions that you may have. I'm happy to have one-on-one discussions with you to help you through this process of developing the COMDEKS landscape seascape strategy. Because, you know, it's as you said, it's time that you need to take to do it right so that you can develop a really strong approach in your country to COMDEKS going forward. So maybe Sunita, if you want to say any last few words. Oh, I think Rina was supposed to come in and say some closing remarks, colleagues. I'm so sorry we don't have more time for questions, but I promise let's do it bilaterally. And I'll send follow-up emails to you all after this session. So over to Rina.
Thank you very much. So I'll be very brief since Teresa and George already gave a kind of closing remarks, good closing remarks. And thank you very much, George and everyone for your sharing your experience and very fascinating and interesting practices and the discussions. And I think it's not too much if we could say that the identification of what is happening in our community and our landscapes and seascapes is a very important. And in terms of figuring out our goal in our activities, which could lead to creating sustainably solid communities and landscapes and seascapes. And we hope that our resilience indicator could be the very useful tool for that. And of course, we very much welcome your feedback and of course questions anytime on the resilience indicators. And again, thank you very much. I would like to continuously working with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rina, Sunita, Alex, George, all of you who have participated in this interactive discussion. I hope you found it beneficial and inspiring you to think some more about how you plan on implementing COMDEKS over the next few months, especially, and also how does this process link to your operational phase 8 country program strategy development? Because remember, this process is not just specific to COMDEKS. This is something that you can apply to SGP generally to facilitate these dialogues in terms of how you think about using the landscape approach to address environmental and social challenges in your country. So thank you all so very much. If you have specific questions, feel free to reach out to me, and maybe even George can help you as well. If you really want to connect with George, we can definitely do that if he's not too busy being retired. So thank you again, colleagues. It was really a pleasure to have all of you here, and special thank you to all of our UNU-IAS colleagues as well. Take care and have a good evening, good rest of the night, good rest of your day. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
And I will share the recording with you after.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye, Risa.
Bye.
Bye-bye,
Bye, Aimee. Bye, George. Bye, Terry.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, Aimee. George, you were so good, George. I learned
Thank you.
so much from you, George. I felt like I was a university student and you were my professor.
He
was
was not
so
supposed.
good.
So we shall be in touch. Great.
George was not supposed to retire.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you. Thank you so much for the intervention
miss you, big time.
Thank you, Frederic.
the knowledge you provide to us. Thank you.
Yeah,
Take care,
thank you.
Frederic.
Thank you.
Yes, George, that was so good. I really felt like I learned so much from you, and I'm sure all of the other colleagues are interested in
He should-
learning more.
Yeah.
He should keep on backstopping us.
I know. I
wherever
think
he
I
is.
need to hire George like as a COMDEKS consultant or something.
Yeah, exactly.
George, if you're bored of being retired, I can
Yeah.
hire you.
Okay.
All right, George. Thank you, and you
Right,
have a great rest of your
bye.
evening. All right.
Right.
Take
Thank
care,
you.
George. Bye.
Bye.
Bye,
Thank you.
Faustine. Bye.
Thank you, Risa. This was
No problem.
so much.
Let's
Appreciate it.
catch up. Let's catch up and discuss some more, okay?
Yeah, sure.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Thanks. Yes.